everyone. Thank you for coming to this roundtable organized by Sustainable Packaging News. And the goal of this roundtable is to share ideas, talk about perspectives, the role of packaging in a circular economy. All of you are well-regarded experts in your field, representing British companies, but companies that operate globally. So your views, ideas, experience will be motivational and inspirational for our international audience. So we can start maybe with a little introduction. Maybe you can each say one, two sentences about yourselves and the companies, why they stand out.
Okay, shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Gary. I'm from TIPA. TIPA is a compostable, flexible packaging business. Been established nearly 12 years now. We operate globally, and our aim as a company is to offer alternative solutions to conventional flexible packaging, and they're all certified compostable. And it covers a broad range of applications from high barrier to low barrier, pre-made packaging formats like stand-up pouches and film for on packaging machinery. Prior to joining TIPA, I did 30 years in conventional packaging, so very familiar with all the classic materials that are around us today. And 6 years ago, decided it was time for a change and to get behind some new technology, and decided to join TIPA and use the knowledge that I had from conventional packaging to help brands and converters switch over to compostables.
Thank you. And Jeremy.
Thanks, Ramona. So I'm Jez Blake. I'm Director of Circular Economy for Berry Global. And Berry Global are one of the largest packaging companies in the world. So we make materials for just about every category and every geography. My background specifically is more in terms of waste management and recycling, with a strong bent towards plastics, having operated a lot of different plastic reprocessing facilities in mechanical, chemical recycling, all sorts of different methodologies. So I'm here because I just want to recycle things and make the world a better place.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dave Gudgeon. I'm the Head of External Affairs at the Reconomy Group. So we're global circular economy specialists, turnover around about £2 billion a year, with a significant presence in kind of North America, Canada, UK and Europe predominantly. My background personally, is 25 odd years now in waste and recycling. So I think I've been talking about packaging pretty much since I started.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, circular economy, it remains a very hot topic despite the current challenges like geopolitical shifts, as you are aware of, and the energy crisis of cost of living and so on. So how can businesses balance sustainability and profitability? Because cost remains a major challenge, I suppose.
You started off with a nice, easy question, which is what I like. Just one that's really straightforward.
Well, great. Yeah.
So it is an enormous challenge, because the reality of the situation is that linear economies are just cheaper to operate in. If you think of plastic packaging, the resin used and the polymer used in plastic packaging is free, right? Yes, it has a cost to convert it and to mine it, but the raw material actually you don't need to pay for, because it's oil and it's just sitting there under the ground. So once it comes out of the ground, yes, it's got some conversion costs, but when you look at actually trying to reuse materials, as soon as you get into the process of looking at recycling materials, then actually you've got all of those conversion costs, plus the raw material has an inherent cost as well. So trying to get to a point where you're equating the two, particularly when there's a volume and economy of scale difference as well, it becomes a very difficult sum to balance. And certainly, as it seems at the moment, the only thing that can push it in the right direction is probably the right regulatory controls.
Yeah.
And whilst there's been a lot of push about trying to find those regulatory levers, I don't think we're quite there with having perfection in relation to it. I don't know if you guys get a bit that, but
look, I think from a kind of a waste and recycling perspective, sustainability and profitability are often one and the same thing. From the businesses in that's received the packaging, it's still usually cheaper to recycle it than it is to stick it in general waste, whether that's in landfill or an energy recovery facility. So I have a slightly different, I suppose, perspective when I look at that end of the marketplace. I think through some of the packaging suppliers that I speak to, I think this kind of real focus on, well, what's the composition of the material and actually what's the source product? Can they reduce the weight of packaging, and the physical amount of packaging is been one of the biggest drivers in the last few years in trying to balance their operating cost and the profit they need to make. It's not a charity at the end of the day, with this kind of push, whether it's legislation or consumer demand, to start increasing recycled content and recyclable output of materials.
Okay. If I talk about it from a compostable point of view, which is my direction, very good description of conventional plastics there, Joes. I think it's a fair assessment, and I think compostables doesn't benefit from cheap import costs for our resins. So we're largely a bio-based sector, so we have much higher input costs, which drives our unit cost much higher, 3 or 4 times higher than conventional plastics. That said, there's a lot of compostable companies. There's a lot of companies using compostable packaging that obviously generate a profit and are very sustainable, and have a successful business. Riverford Organics, for instance, in the UK, is a customer of ours and runs a business based purely on compostable packaging. So when it's done correctly, it can definitely work. I think, as the industry evolves and times goes forward and volume increases, certainly resin costs for our sector will come down as the volume increases. Just the economy of scales will help us. So I think that time is for the future. But I think when we're looking at compostable customers today, we often say invest in compostable packaging. So you are paying more, but if it resonates with your brand values and your consumer, the opinions of your consumers, then it is something that you can make a profit from. But it is connecting with the right type of customer. But we know that it isn't mainstream at this moment. We hope one day it will be.
I was just going to ask about customers. How will you make customers willing to spend more money on sustainable solutions? For example, I was looking at your website that you have these bags for sweets, which are compostable, but will the final consumer, people like me or you, actually know that this material is, they have those properties, and would they be willing to act accordingly, or will they just throw it in the bin? So I think that is a challenge to actually persuade the general public. Not the regulations, I think, need to be in place. That is the driver, but how do you actually make sure that the general public is more educated and is willing to spend maybe a little bit money on sustainable solutions?
Well, that's the $1 million question for us. Because our business spans across, packaging products and the recycling and waste management side of this as well. Ultimately, all conversations come down to customers. And if it's consumers buying products, purchase intent and brand intent is always the thing that are going to decide whether or not you're going to do something. And for premium grade products, there is a price differential that some market groups are prepared to pay for certain products. But it's actually a very delicate balance, a very delicate number. And the reality of the world we're in at the moment is the economics are just making it so that people are making lower and lower cost decisions. The major brands, their market share goes to low cost retailers in certain categories. So there's not a case of sustainability directly turns into money for high volume commodity products. Yes, there are always some products which are going to fall into the category markets with really strong sectors, I'm sure, for Gary. But coming up with killer products are products really which are going to tick every box. So they're going to be circular, they're going to be low carbon, there's going to be sustainable, and ultimately they're going to be lower cost and give brand image that people are going to want to buy. And so that's the killer question in all of it. And there are products that come to the market all the time that meet those requirements, but actually it requires people to be creative and keep pushing, to be honest.
And maybe regulations to push those products forward as well. Like if there is compostable materials, then they should be promoted, and all the other materials then should be discontinued. That's the ideal world, but
I mean, look, we've certainly seen if you look at compostables, I suppose the experience for Reconomy and some of our customers is it's been something that's actually quite easy to talk to businesses about in a workplace setting, because you can also remove some of the fossil fuel-based plastics, the traditional plastics, out of the process and put the compostables in, and then manage the front to back end supply chain to point of disposal. It's a far more complex conversation, I think, when you talk about engagement with consumers from a supermarket and how they dispose of their waste at home, because to educate somebody that that's a plant-based plastic, that doesn't mean you can put it in your plastics recycling at home, which everybody's going to be legally required to do next year when simpler recycling for local authorities becomes mandatory. So there's a gap in the engagement with consumers around actually what are the benefits of it and how are you going to best manage the disposal, because local authorities aren't necessarily going to be particularly well placed right now to manage compostable packaging, and that is almost its barrier to being the brilliant product that it can and should be. But actually it's the infrastructure to back it up for the disposal that's really the gap in that part of the market.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense what you said, and we'd agree. I think if we go back to consumer perceptions on compostables, Amcor's done some great research over several years on more than one occasion, and they asked the question, what messaging on pack would drive a positive purchase? Compostables came out number one on two of those occasions. So we know from a consumer point of view, they like compostables. I think it's trusted. I think we've all heard terrible stories about recycling not working, with material being burnt in far off lands and exported and not ending up, with the recycling dream that it should. I think compostables doesn't have that baggage. It's a trusted process. It does struggle though with the disposal, undoubtedly. So TIPA has been running a compostable coalition now for 3 years. It's a UKRI funded project, and we've been looking at how compostables could be used as a mainstream solution, and we've been testing the theory then with practice. So we've looked at curbside collection, closed loop events, and the home delivery model as 3 waste streams, and we've been proving, well, through the experiments that we've ran, that consumers do the right thing if they're given the right information. So OPRL let us use a proposed logo. It isn't commercially available today, but it was a logo they asked us to test. So we used that on the packaging that was given to households, and the households were allowed to put compostable packaging in with their food waste and garden waste collection, so commingled. And we tracked where their bins were actually collected over a 6-week period. We knew what they were given, and then we actually went through the bin and measured how successful they were in putting the right packaging in the right bin, and also the level of contamination that went into the bin of non-labelled packaging. And the output from that was an increase in compostable collection over the period of the trial and a reduction in the levels of contamination. So I think when the education's there and when the clear labelling is there, absolutely people will do the right thing.
yes, yeah.
And we did a similar exercise in restaurants as well. Fast food type establishments. We used colour-coded logos with colour-coded bins. Again, tracked that over a period of time. Again, we saw the same: contamination down, collection rates up. And the other interesting thing we noticed with this, because it was a food waste collection, the volume of food waste collected increased over time as well. And one of the connections with compostables is we want to encourage the collection of food waste combined with compostable packaging. We don't have a perfect solution today, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the coalition is still pushing to find a place. We're starting to sort of get the data to help, we hope, make better informed decisions, but we have to wait and see how successful we're going to be.
Well, I think you've struck on it for me in the fact that if we're in a position where we need solutions for certain things, and the solutions are different depending on which lens you're looking at, because the waste management sector, I haven't worked in it for a long time myself. The reality is it's a high volume, low margin enterprise, and when you set up facilities to support local authority contracts, they are there for a long time and the pace of packaging design change versus the infrastructure required to recycle with those changes in packaging design, they're polarly different in terms of the evolution in relation to it. So what we need is really well thought out solutions, and then we just need to let them bed in and let them permeate and go through the solutions. And I think you've got two sides of it. If you look at them from a business to business point of view, business to business care about carbon these days. That tends to be the sort of thing that people are concerned about. But from a consumer point of view, consumers care about pollution. Is the reality. If you take both sides, everybody cares about the cost, but it's the carbon versus pollution story. And if you look at some flexible packaging products, because they are the challenging area that we need to move into solving through simple recycling and everything else, actually take a crisp packet. How many times do you have to, your process is going to work, and then how many times do you have to recycle that before you get the carbon benefit of using less polymer in the first place and lighter packaging and all these other sort of things? It's actually quite a complicated situation to sort of square. So that side with flexibles is a far more complicated question as to what the right thing is for the market. Yeah, we're going to collect it. That's the first challenge done. Tick. What we're going to do with it? That's the next challenge. So we've got a bit of time, but not long actually.
And you mentioned solutions. Will these solutions be the same for all markets, or will they be specific for the UK market, for Europe, for North America, Far East? That's another challenge, isn't it?
Definitely. And some pack formats are not going to survive the cut when it goes into that global scale. Yeah. But there's no such thing as standard infrastructure. Even if you look at the UK, I'm sure, Dave, you'd agree with this. A MRF is a great title, catch-all title that describes what a facility is, but actually what's inside the doors can be a picking line and 2 men and a dog, or it could be £100 million facility. But they both got the title MRF on them.
Yeah, look, I think when you talk about some of those challenges of scaling globally, Europe and the UK have obviously diverged in policy and strategy post-Brexit, and not to mention that for too many people, but it certainly adds layers of complexities to markets. If you look at the Middle East and recycling infrastructure, it's not there in the same way that it is in large parts of Europe. If you look at the North American market, by comparison, they generate about they have about 6 times the population of the UK, but they generate 10 times the amount of packaging waste as the UK. So it's such a consumer-driven culture in North America at the moment that the different politics that come into play, and in statewide legislation, if you're looking at the US, means that sustainable investment for packaging manufacturers and for business is really complex, because it can't be one size fits all globally, as much as we'd all love it to be. There's clearly quite a lot of differing opinion about climate change and what the best approach is and the best material to use. So I think packaging producers, they've got to be adaptable and nimble and ready to move with regional markets. Right?
It is a challenge, isn't it? So how do your companies manage that? Like TIPA, for example, you just reinforce your footprint in the States recently. Yeah, do you have the acquisition? So do you have different approaches for that market, or how do you handle those differences?
Yeah, so we manufacture in Australia, Europe and America. So 3 locations. Intentional, obviously, because of the markets we felt were conducive to compostables, and there was the opportunities there for us. The rules are slightly different in different countries. So composting certification isn't a global standard. So we have EN 13432 in Europe. We have different standards for BPI in America, and then we have Australian standards as well. So us as a company supplying global products, we have to do different compost testing for different regions. We obviously have to have different food contact, so the FDA approval is different to European approval, so I'm sure Barry's the same. We have to work in the markets we're in and get the appropriate certification. we have no choice. If we want to sell in those markets, we have to do that, and we do. So that's,
Yeah, and that's the same.
our plan and vision.
Yeah,
There.
it's differential approach.
Yeah, well, we don't own any factories, so we're a bit unusual. So we do everything through partnerships. So we own the formulation and the patent behind the material, if you like, and we also have the expertise to produce. And then we work with local capacity and capability in those regions to manufacture the film spores. So scalability is very easy for us as long as we can find the right partner in those regions to grow. So
Thank you.
that's how we handle it.
And how does Berry Global address these challenges of different regulations in different markets?
Right. Well, it's a lot of people with a lot of people thinking about it in the different areas. Is the honest answer, and in a number of those locations, speaking very close to home, there's been some quite challenging situations just to get things into market. But I think going back to the comment you made about climate change, that packaging gets talked about in the sentence with climate change quite a lot, but actually underlying position is good packaging, and the right packaging contributes very positively towards reducing climate change because of extending food waste, reducing food waste, extending shelf life, all this kind of stuff. So there are some really strong drivers to us getting this right. And what I have seen in different locations, in different places around the world, regardless of the different regulations and different things, is good products and good design does cross boundaries. People design a good product, it does pervade itself. If you look at the milk jug or the milk bottle, the HDP milk bottle that's created, the evolution of that design got to a point, it's made from material, it's uncoloured, so it's easy to go in recycling systems, it's got a strong intrinsic value, so people recognise the value. In the collection systems, it's used a lot in the household, so you don't see it littered. The designs evolved to have rounded corners and translucent lids, and the product differentiation has been done with clever labelling and things like that. So it's evolved over a period of time where the fundamentals of that product exist in quite a lot of different countries. The US, it's very popular in the US with the food quality. So I think that there's a lot of lessons that can be drawn from actually having a good idea that works. Unfortunately, there's always someone who's ready to spoil a good idea. Clever ideas like putting black layers on the inside of HDP bottles because they thought it would, make it more UV stable. But yeah, stupid ideas are going to come in. But if we stick to good ideas, that these things, we do know the right answers. And a lot of the time, it gets quite frustrating for me when people come up with fantastic new solutions for problems that are already largely solved. There's enough problems that are not solved. Solve the problems that are not solved. Don't say, we've found a fantastic way to use PET drink bottles to make new roads. No. Don't make them into roads. Turn them back into new PET drink bottles. Technology's there. We just need to proliferate that technology and do it consistently.
Yeah. Would you agree?
I certainly do. I think there's a few key words from both of you that stick in. Partnership is a word used strongly. Innovation, creativity. For me, and for Reconomy, fundamentally, then it comes down to this concept that if we're going to close the gap on circularity and create these true circular economies, it's collaboration. It's to break the linear economy. It's the product manufacturer, the business, the whole supply chain within a circular economy needs to come together to then share that best practice and solution, to take a more partnership approach rather than a siloed mentality of individuals focusing on their part of a process, whether that's putting black liners on a bottle or anything else, right? We need more forums, more events, more ways of bringing experts together to be able to probably work through the not so great ideas versus the actual good ones that can and should work, and then creating an investment structure that goes with it. And I guess that's the same reason you've created the kind of the compostables groups that you've got work together is bring business together rather than competing against each other at times as well. I think for us at Reconomy, that's probably one of the biggest takeaways for closing this circularity gap.
I mean, certainly just on that point, I mean, this is probably one for the future of compostables as well, is I can remember sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, polypropylene as a material wasn't widely recycled in the UK at the curbside. You know, it was, some facilities did, some facilities didn't, but it's used in such high volumes and there's no real barriers to the circularity of it, but it just wasn't done. And it's now in a position where actually it is accepted, it's widely recycled. You know, NGOs accept it is, you know, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, other people, they accept that it is a widely recycled material and is a revenue generating stream for local authorities and waste management companies who are operating it. But from a position where you know the right answer, but to get to a point where it is actually accepted. And now if you look at the waste management network in the UK, there are a couple of products which are accepted as standard that you're going to design in. You're going to design in so you can deal with clear PET. You're going to be able to deal with HDPE containers. You're going to be able to deal with polypropylene. But the casualties along the way have got rid of things like PVC. You know, everybody's got together and said, well, actually, PVC in packaging, it doesn't really, creates more problems than it solves. So it's hardly ever seen in these situations. So that level of collaboration you're talking about there, it is possible, but hopefully we can shortcut it so it doesn't take 10 years of organic development to get to an answer that we already knows the right first place.
From a plastics perspective, polypropylenes and HDPEs and PETs are now mandatory in the UK for businesses as of 1st of April. All local authorities will have to recycle all of that grade of plastic as of next year, and micro businesses from 2027, plastic films coming in from 2027. So from the UK perspective, the regulation and legislation is also really helping drive the right behaviours from consumers and then create the business investment in the processing infrastructure to look at these materials. Then we've still got to deal with the PVCs and the hard to recycle plastics. Is going to be the next challenge that needs to be addressed by 2028. Otherwise, if it ends up in general waste and going to energy from waste facilities, it's going to incur carbon tax through the emissions trading scheme, which is already affecting other parts of Europe. So it's going to stimulate more markets and more need for chemical recycling. I would imagine we're going to see the growth of and various bits for plastics, pyrolysis and whatever else. We have to see this evolution in how we handle hard to recycle plastics.
And this is, where we believe compostables can provide a solution. So you can have a complex laminate that is probably beyond economically viable to recycle it, where you can make that same structure out of a compostable multi-layer laminate. As long as it's certified compostable, it'll still protect the product, it will still give the shelf life and functionality, but ultimately you can return that to nature through composting at the end of it, as long as we have the waste infrastructure. So we firmly see us as part of the future solution. Just going back to the partnerships, one of the first things I did when I joined TIPA was visit a composting facility. So, as a new and emerging sector, we can't really be lazy. We have to be very creative and think about how we fit in, the people that are involved in the chain, if you like. And the coalition has really helped cement those relationships and test the theory and really prove that you can use compostables in large volume and collect it and sort it and compost it and return it to nature. And let's not forget the farmers need compost. If we want to regenerate our soils, which is the circularity, that compost is used to replace lost topsoil. It adds nutritional content to the soil, aids with water retention, and it just makes the soil a more fertile environment for growing the food that we eat. And the bio-content obviously is the continuation of that for us. So that's the circularity and the journey that our material goes on.
Thank you very much. I mean, you mentioned a very important concept, partnerships and collaboration. I think circular economy cannot work without partnerships between suppliers, manufacturers, customers, and the general public. So are there any particular initiatives within your companies to support the sustainability focus of your suppliers, for example?
So it's quite a big question, really, because we work with a lot of brands and a lot of retailers, probably almost all of them, to be honest with you. And I think between the three of us, we'd probably catch everybody in that situation. And I would say mostly we, certainly within the UK, I can't think of a single one that we're not pushing on an open door with these days. You know, the will is definitely there for people to sit and talk about it, and we have a lot of conversations, a lot of workshops to engage in what's the right solutions going forward. And although there are a lot of pressures around this at the moment, and a lot of things that are not going well, in the global footprint of the businesses we're on, I don't know if you guys agree, but actually I see the UK very much, as not just because I live here, as a really good and active sandbox to find the solutions for the places. Because the will from the government into relation to regulations and the closeness of the sort of forums that you can actually communicate for a regulatory point of view, the will of the brands and the retailers and the engagement from them in relation to these, and the fact that we're having events like this where we're talking across industry means that actually there's a real will to make it work and solve the problem. And I'm not saying we're the closest. There's other places that have got really good examples. You know, we've got fantastically high recycling rates in Wales because of a very specific, you know, policy landscape and approach that the Welsh have taken. We're very close to European countries that have had really high success in relation to DRS. You know, we've got a very diverse Smurf network that, yes, it would be nice if it was all very similar, but actually we've learned a lot of lessons along the way by seeing what works and what doesn't work. So I do feel we're on the tipping point of actually coming up with some killer solutions that are going to be more appropriate to, you know, be spread around different parts of the world. So if you're going to test something, let's do it here first and just get it to work and then go off. You know, plastic tax, you know, we were the first country in the world to put in a functioning plastic tax. And we learned some very valuable lessons from that plastic tax about what doesn't work.
I think the UK definitely influences the world, and people look at the UK for direction. That's not always a good thing, let's be honest. The plastic tax, for instance, decided to tax the biosector because it doesn't contain recycled content for certain polymers. Well, we had no desire to contain recycled content. Our ambition is to have bio content, but they wouldn't make an exclusion for that. So we are taxed as though we don't have any recycled content. So there are some good things that are exported and bad. I think the question for me is really there's some great success in rigids, undoubtedly there is in recycling. You know, that's fantastic to see. But I think in terms of thin film recycling, that's a big question for me, and we're yet to see how the future will look, you know, for thin film recycling. Ready for recycling isn't recycling. So we really need to see how we can be able to recycle this vast amount of material at scale, economically, you know, it's sustainably, financially sustainably, not only environmentally sustainably. And I think for me, that's the big unanswered question. And that was the reason I joined TIPA, really, is 6 years ago, I couldn't see this working. And here we are 6 years later. And a lot of progress has been made in terms of monomaterial, but we're not really seeing high volumes of thin film being recycled yet today. And we need to, you know, at the end of the day, if we're going to take the 4% and 5% up to 30%, a lot of money needs to be invested in thin film recycling and quickly. And I carefully read the news, you know, the packaging press all the time to see, and we're not starting to see it yet. And, you know, for the compostable sector, we're a solution today. You know, we work today, we're certified. It's very difficult to do compostables. You know, we have to go through a lot of hoops in terms of proving that we're safe. We have to meet all of the criteria of what we're packing in terms of barrier, shelf life, functionality. And it will compost at the end of life, and that compost can be used, obviously, by the farmers, as I said. So we feel as though we're a little bit of a solution on the shelf waiting for our day, patiently waiting to see how well recycling will succeed. Our ask is that we're part of the solution. Recycling has to succeed, undoubtedly. Let compostables take some slack as well. maybe give you another 10 or 15% and divert it away from incineration, which unfortunately is where it's likely to go.
It certainly is with some grades of plastic at the moment. There's an inevitability. If you look at the pharmaceuticals market globally and you take something as simplistic as blister packs for your tablets, that's a ridiculous amount of plastic that's being wasted. So for Reconomy, we're working on a scheme with some pharmaceutical companies at the moment to effectively get consumer returns, even of empty blister packs. We're working in North America, where we've got schemes to manage the packaging as well as any pharmaceutical product that's left in tablets. That's obviously an incredibly heavily regulated market, as you can imagine, in North America. But it's all designed to find more ways to capture perfectly recyclable products that fall through the gaps in the grate at the moment. But it requires consumer engagement and scale. And we're working on an insulin pens recycling solution and various bits and bobs for the product. You got to think about vapes. Obviously, there's a vapes ban in the UK coming into force this year, but imagine what that looks like globally, and the amount that are being wasted, and the amount of plastic that gets wasted, and there's a home for almost all of these plastics and compostables. It is just that need to help join the dots from A to B to C, and I'm fortunate enough that I do get to see at least some of that in action globally at the moment. I think we would all like to see more, but as you said, we start somewhere.
So maybe the consumer awareness and engagement, and you said that should be enhanced and increased and promoted maybe. So I don't know whether your companies have any tools how to do that in practice. And I think the consumers are willing. Like we saw this example in Britain, the supermarkets plastic bags. It didn't take very long to almost eliminate them, and everyone brings their bag. So things like that, in practical terms,
That did drive up plastic use of bags, though, because the bag for life.
Yes. I've read about that as well. So there are these unintentional consequences of everything. Yeah, I know. But the consumers, they are willing, I think, if they can get engaged at a reasonable price, not increased cost for them. But what is there anything the companies, global companies like yourself, can do to improve that?
This viewpoint, it's not. We talk a lot about consumers and consumer behaviour in all this, and I feel like I can be quite harsh because I am a consumer, so I can be horrible about myself. And the reality is there's this wish recycling gap, which we've seen in lots of different studies, where people answer questions in surveys in one way, but actually when they're monitored in what they do in the shop, they do something completely different, because it's all about convenience and speed and time and what they want at the time. And so I think we've got to be realistic about this. And consumers stopped using single-use carry bags because they had to pay for them and they weren't available. That's the thing. It's a case of Big Brother sorted the problem out for them. Consumers have stopped buying so many PVC products, going back to a previous thing, because they're not on the market anymore, because the people, between converters and retailers, waste managers would come together and just said, this doesn't work, we'll get rid of it. So I think there's a lot more of this that needs to happen, in the fact, just very quietly, we've just got to make life easy to do the right thing, right? And it's got to be easy to do the right thing. Anybody who's got to, as soon as you get to situations where you require consumers to do really complicated things like break apart products and put that in that bin and that in this in that bin, when you know what people do in recycling, the things people put in recycling bags, it never ceases to amaze me, to be perfectly honest with you. So you always have to design everything for the lowest common denominator in terms of who's going to do what in relation to this. So there is an element of consumer engagement in trying to get people to do the right thing, but it doesn't take away the responsibility of us making it easy. As a business, between all by the shouting, we used about nearly 3 million tons of polymer last year across the globe. Now that's a big number, and we're not going to solve that with mechanical recycling. We're not going to solve that with compostables. What is going to be a blended solution, which is why our targets go into the world, circular materials, which is we will take in chemical recycling, we will look at biopolymers, we will look at everything to have that blended solution of what it is. But ultimately, it comes back to the big guiding principles are the design of the thing that goes into the territory where it's going into, that it has to be compatible with the systems that it goes into. And that's what we need to do.
I think one of the areas that we've focused on recently is fruit and vegetable stickers. They're here. We're not going to lose them anytime soon. They perform a function. They are needed for identification. And as we move away from packaged fresh produce, that identification on the different brands of apple and the variety of apple, is a key. And obviously they carry price point information as well. So I think as a sector, that's a sector that logically should go compostable. Why would you have a conventional plastic sticker on an apple peel that's going to go into the organic waste stream and contaminate the compost in the soil? So we're trying to spot with these trends and then provide solutions for the easy to win. And for us, that feels like an obvious, a bit like the compostable tea bag. Why would you have plastic in tea bags that's going to hang around forever when most tea bags will probably go in with a food-based collection in the future? So there are some easy wins, and we should definitely tick those off and then focus on the bigger challenges as well, in parallel to that, which will take more time, effort, and money.
And what about using less packaging? I mean, is that an issue to sort of try again, educate consumers that they can actually do with less packaging? They don't need this tea bags. Every single tea bag is packaged separately.
Yeah, sorry, I was referring to the actual bag that goes in the cup, but you're right. We should always start with reduce. Absolutely. Yeah. Do we need it? Yes, no. And if we don't, then let's not use it for sure. And if you do need it, let's minimize it as well. Let's get the thickness right and the size optimized so we're not using too much. We've all opened a bag of air and found a product sitting in the bottom of it, and largely it's for shelf presence. Well, if we're responsible about our packaging use, we should minimize the amount we use to pack products for sure.
Yep.
And there are some massive challenges in relation to this, because you think that shelf presence one is one that's come up quite a lot. If you think the concentrated products that are going into the market now, like if you buy concentrated bleach, you can buy it in a tablet and just mix it with your own water at home. But at the moment, you've got a bottle of bleach this big, nice, bright, shiny colour, lots of pretty branding, everything on it, versus something which is, the size of a sugar cube going on a shelf. These, and if you had a similar pack size that still had the same brand image, you'd have enough bleach for the next 5 years. So there is an element in this of just the reimagination of new products going into the market for the new world we're living in is definitely a requirement. And I think the low-hanging fruit scenario is where there's obvious ones in there that people need to solve. People need to get on board. And it's annoying sometimes when the exception stops you doing the right thing. Oh no, we can't possibly have compostable packaging, use that as an example, because this would go in the recycling. But if you have a sticker on a piece of fruit, obviously that's, it's not compatible with recycling because it's too small in the first place. Even if it goes in the right place, it's too small. So there are a lot of solutions that exist for the right things. And we just need to do the right things at scale that's impactful. Going back to polypropylene, because we use a lot of that, and we use a lot of other polymers, but in the UK we use a lot of polypropylene. The recycling of it was done to a reasonably high level, but there was a lot of downcycling in relation to it turning into park benches and pipes. So we invested in a facility to turn it back into contact-sensitive and food-grade packaging that takes about half the UK volume. But it's because it got to a point where that's an easy decision. You think, well, actually, that's a solution that works. It works at volume. The regulatory framework is moving in the right direction to make it work. And when these things happen, they suddenly become investable propositions you can go through. And I'm sure it's the same with the other guy I went through as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's move on to the future. You mentioned solutions. That is a difficult one, to come up with some novel solutions. But what is the future? Is it maybe new materials? Because plastics, if they consist of several layers, they are difficult to recycle. So is it like new innovative materials, or less packaging, bigger consumer awareness? What is the easiest solution, you think?
Every single one of those that you mentioned is actually part of the solution. So look at it through a few different lenses at the moment. We've just started working on a project at Reconomy a few months ago with a fairly large pub company. We're actually, rather than putting glass bottles into a recycling bin, them going away, being crushed, melted down, turned into a new glass bottle, then going straight back to the brewer to making another bottle and refill again. Actually, we've created a reuse scheme and connected in with a company that's taking the bottles, having them completely cleaned, put back up to the correct standard, and then being placed straight back to the brewing process, so that it's reduction and reuse 101 straight away. Done.
That's great.
At the moment, it looks like a 60% carbon reduction. So when we're talking about carbon, it's more cost effective. From a is it commercially sustainable model, which is a big barrier for a lot of businesses at the moment. Actually, the initial trials that we've run show about 40% reduction in the budget costs. But scaling that solution, as we talked about earlier on, scale is the challenge, and it's scaling out that solution. So reduction and reuse is going to be vitally important. We're also working with another customer that's switched to clamshell packaging that's compostable. They've reduced the shape and size of their pizza boxes, and I think that reduced packaging by about 20%. So they're looking at reduction as much as they are recycling, but there's so much more focus now on what's the recycled content coming into a product, as much as it is it recyclable on the back end of the loop. It's all very well and good manufacturing something that's recyclable, but if nobody's pumping recycled content into that product, then how are we really creating a closed loop economy, a circular economy? We're not. You're saying, well, I can put something out that somebody else can recycle and somebody else can buy back, but actually I'll continue to buy virgin material, and that's not gonna work long term. That's not the direction that any government, pretty much, that we're working with is talking about. So we have to focus even more on kind of closing that circularity gap.
Yes. And then the example you mentioned about the bottles, the glass bottle, that's an excellent one. Yeah. The reusability. So I think that is a topic for very global as well. Reuse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing a lot of reuse for it. It's packaging, whether it's for one use or 1,000 uses, these are just packaging designs that need to be developed. These schemes are exciting ones coming through. We've supported new milk trials or full services for reusable milk bottles recently in Scotland. It's coming together to make the cups where all the coffee shops come together all use the same cup, which we're really happy that it's our cup that is being used in those areas. And they do take innovation in their own way, chips in them so you can track how many times they've been used and how many times they've been washed, and all these kind of innovations are moving the world on in the right direction. But I couldn't agree more in relation to your first comment about the fact we need all of it, because in all of these formats, in all of these places where we go, yeah, we've got some problem areas, but we just need to do what we know how to do it well and do it better, iteratively better all of the time. Higher yields, higher performance, higher quality, all those lead to higher recycled content rates, more reuse levels, all this kind of stuff. And just, the circular economy is not a picture anymore. It's actually a reality in a lot of segments. So it's got some real numbers to back it up. But the biggest challenge I still think remains is the commerciality of circular economy, because that is the challenge that needs a lot of heads thinking about it. because it's more expensive. There's no getting away from the fact that in most situations, circular economy is more expensive. So we need to make that either challenge ourselves to make it not more expensive, which is difficult with labour costs, energy costs, all the things that go into actually making it a reality, versus the take and throw relationship where we buy cheap products from Southeast Asia and just linear economy going through. And regulation has definitely got a place to play in that. Consumer behaviour would hope that contributes to that positively, but only to a certain extent, in my view. But we just need to solve that problem. That's the thing that's really going to make it lift off.
And just to say on that, when we talk about economic stability, if you look at the UK and the extended producer responsibility, they place a fairly high level of taxation on composite packaging, of plastic packaging, with a kind of a multi-stack system through the recycling assessment methodology. So for some of the packing manufacturers and then the businesses that are buying from those manufacturers, I think it's really important that they start to understand, actually, how do we mitigate against future cost? This might cost more now, but is making the right decision, whether that's switching to a certain grade of plastic, whether it's switching to a compostable. What's the longer term cost implication, and is an investment now actually cost mitigation for the future? And if you start thinking and looking longer term, that is going to play a really important role in ultimately the success of the packaging manufacturers as well as their end markets. So I just think that's something that we have to factor. It's not just about what you spent today.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what we've done as part of the coalition is to look at the cost of incineration versus composting. We know recycling will achieve whatever it achieves, and the balance is logically going to go for incineration or landfill. The cost of incineration will increase, but the gate fee for composting is currently at a level that, is cheaper to incinerate maybe today. But as that cost for incineration goes up, it's going to be cheaper actually to send material for composting, let's be honest. So we've then got an economic driver rather than just a sustainability or an environmental driver. So we're making people aware of that now so they can take that into account with their long-term plans. And in terms of new products, TIPA's a hive of innovation, if I'm honest. So we are working on new barrier materials. What we're trying to do is unlock what you can do with compostables. So we started off with fairly rudimental materials for fresh produce and clothing. We're now moving into far more complex laminates with high barriers to gas, water, light. We're working on, the holy grail of crisp packaging for the home compostable crisp bag. We've got ketchup sachets and mayonnaise sachets, things that are very unlikely to get recycled but will be contaminated with food and have long shelf life requirements and have a very difficult product inside them. So as this year progresses, we'll be bringing out new solutions. It takes a while. The compost test is 12 months, so we know what's coming. And we'll be rolling those out as we go into this year. So it's an exciting time for compostables.
Thank you. It's an exciting time for circular economy as well, I think, as it moves forward. And I think it became clear in the discussion that it will move forward in partnerships. No one is going to success on their own. So partnerships, collaboration on national and international level as well, supported by regulation. So would you like to add any last comment, any of you, or are you happy with the discussion we had?
For me, I'm just happy as long as every day I get up and I still have the hope that we're going to make the world a better place.
Yes.
So when I lose the faith that actually we're moving in a completely the wrong direction, then I might rethink my life. But at the moment, I see, the will of events like this, with the fact that we're coming together to even talk about it, and we can talk about positive things across the board. Nobody likes regulation. Nobody likes having to pay more money for things, but actually we're in a position where actually there is hope, and we are seeing green shoots of circular economy actually happening in real life. So
excellent.
We just need to keep the faith.
Yeah, keep the faith.
And I think it's one of the most exciting times ever in packaging. We've gone from just making things and not worrying about it. I did 30 years of that largely before TIPA. Everyone cares about packaging now, and everybody cares about its end of life. It's a really interesting time from recycling, composting, across the board, really. So now's the time to get it right and come up with the solutions and move packaging to the place it should be in, which is a great place.
For exciting times and keeping the faith.
Yes,
absolutely. Look, and I just say, look, I think from a Reconomy perspective and the experience we're seeing at the moment, consistent regulation and clear direction gives you investor confidence. We talk about technology, we talk about innovation. That requires money, and so regulations are pain, but at the same time, actually, it's the stability we need to then create this circular economy. So a lot of the work we're seeing in the UK, Europe, and parts of the Americas are very positive for the packaging market, I would say, at the moment.
So thank you very much for this positive ending. Thank you for the discussion. It was a pleasure having a very interesting discussion. Thank you.